Everyone wants to become their best self. It sounds noble, productive, even spiritual. We're told it's the path to success, fulfillment, and peace. But Carl Jung saw something very different. He saw a trap, an illusion disguised as progress, an obsession with constant improvement that hides a deeper, more dangerous truth: that many people aren't growing at all. They're escaping, not moving forward, but running away from who they really are. Jung didn't talk about self-optimization. He talked about integration. The goal wasn't to become better, it was to become whole. He warned that when we focus only on upgrading ourselves, we split into fragments. The parts we admire, the achiever, the warrior, the calm professional, are pushed into the spotlight. Meanwhile, the parts we reject, the insecure, the impulsive, the ashamed, are buried into the unconscious. And buried things don't disappear, they become weapons. That's not healing, that's repression. If this message resonates with you, hit subscribe. Because this isn't about motivation, it's about truth. The kind that makes you uncomfortable but frees you in the process. Jung called this hidden realm the shadow, the rejected self, the emotions, fears, and instincts we pretend we've outgrown. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What he meant is simple. What you ignore controls you. You'll think you're evolving, but in reality, you're just reinforcing the same loop, just with nicer language and better habits. You're not changing, you're just becoming a better actor. Most people don't want wholeness. They want applause. They want to appear healed, evolved, and above it all. They want to wear spirituality like a badge. They want growth that fits inside a morning routine and looks good on social media. But Jung warned that any transformation that ignores the shadow is cosmetic. It's performance, and performance is exhausting. Because no matter how good the act, deep down, your psyche knows what's being hidden. This is the obsession Jung warned about: self-improvement that serves as self-rejection. Where you chase a future version of yourself so relentlessly, you begin to hate who you are now. The person who doubts, who fails, who gets angry, who feels lost. And when you reject that person, you reject your humanity. The deeper you go into the illusion of becoming your best self, the further you drift from peace. Because peace doesn't come from fixing, it comes from facing. It comes from recognizing your contradictions, not eliminating them. From learning how to live with your fear, your shame, your darkness, instead of pretending they no longer exist. So before you add another book to your shelf, another habit to your calendar, another goal to your list, ask yourself, is this coming from love or fear? Are you growing or are you escaping? Because one path leads to wholeness, and the other leads to burnout wearing a mask of ambition. The culture of self-improvement thrives on the idea that you are never enough. There's always another weakness to eliminate, another strength to build, another layer to polish. It sells you a future self that's shinier, more disciplined, more admired, and convinces you that you must chase it endlessly. But Carl Jung saw this cycle for what it really is: a loop of spiritual inflation, a never-ending attempt to transcend the human experience, instead of learning how to live within it. Jung warned against the danger of identifying too strongly with the persona, the social mask we wear to meet expectations. When you over-identify with the ideal self, you begin to abandon the authentic one. Your worth becomes tied to how well you perform improvement. You meditate, journal, read, hustle, not always out of joy or clarity, but out of fear. Fear that stopping would expose you as unworthy. And yet, the parts you work hardest to hide are often the ones holding the key to your peace. Your insecurities, your envy, your anger. Jung believed these weren't flaws to erase, but signals. Invitations to integrate, to explore, to make peace with what's been exiled. Because real evolution doesn't happen through denial. It happens when the ego steps aside and the whole self, light and shadow, is allowed to exist without shame. Jung didn't offer easy steps. He offered a path that's far more difficult and far more freeing, one that doesn't promise perfection, but promises depth. The kind of depth that can't be measured by productivity apps or morning routines, but by how honestly you're willing to face yourself when no one is watching. Jung understood something we still struggle to admit, that real growth often looks like regression. It looks like breakdowns, discomfort, and confrontation, not clarity or control. He believed that what we call personal development is often just another mask for fear. Fear of sitting still. Fear of meeting the parts of ourselves we've spent our lives avoiding. We celebrate the person who wakes up at 5 a.m., who journals and fasts and takes cold showers. But we ignore the one who finally admits they're exhausted, who finally stops pretending, who finally lets the truth come up. That person isn't weak. That person is doing real work. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That means the path to becoming whole isn't paved with perfection. It's paved with pain. The kind that doesn't go away with discipline or routines. The kind that sits in your chest until you stop trying to escape it. You can chase routines and rituals forever, but until you're willing to meet yourself where you actually are, not where you want to be, you will never be free. Because freedom doesn't come from mastering your emotions. It comes from honoring them, from listening without fixing, from allowing without judging. This is where most people quit, not because the work is too hard, but because it's too honest. Because it strips away every excuse, every distraction, every illusion of progress, and it forces you to ask a question few dare to ask. Can I face who I really am without running, without numbing, without needing to change the answer? That's where peace begins. Not at the finish line, but at the moment you stop sprinting away from yourself. Self-improvement often feels empowering. New habits, new goals, new identity. But Carl Jung warned that transformation without integration becomes illusion. If you don't bring your whole self into the process, especially the parts you dislike, you're not evolving, you're escaping. Jung believed that the pursuit of growth becomes dangerous when it's fueled by avoidance. Think about it. Why do so many people keep chasing the next version of themselves? Because deep down, they're convinced the current version is unworthy. And as long as that belief goes unexamined, every goal becomes another way to outrun the self. The culture of self-improvement rarely asks you to slow down. It rewards speed, volume, hustle. But Jung understood that real change happens slowly, painfully, and most often in solitude. It doesn't look like progress from the outside. It looks like standing still, like facing the things you've buried, like listening to the uncomfortable thoughts instead of numbing them with productivity. Most people are trying to grow while dragging a suitcase of shame behind them. They try to build confidence without ever addressing their self-hate. They try to be more present while still haunted by unspoken grief. This is why so many people burn out, even while doing all the right things. Because self-improvement becomes a distraction from self-confrontation. To Jung, the only sustainable transformation is the one that includes the shadow, the fear, the contradiction, the inner chaos, the guilt, not to glorify it, but to understand it, to stop being afraid of your own inner world. Because that's the real trap of endless improvement. The belief that peace is waiting at the end of your next breakthrough, instead of being something you can allow right now, exactly as you are. There's a cost to constantly chasing a better version of yourself, not just in time or effort, but in identity. When every day becomes a ritual of fixing, upgrading, refining, you forget how to simply exist. You forget how to be human. Carl Jung understood that our greatest suffering doesn't come from our flaws. It comes from our refusal to accept them. From the belief that peace only comes once we've erased every imperfection. But wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It means integration. And integration requires the courage to sit with the parts of yourself you wish didn't exist. You start to see the trap when the progress stops feeling satisfying, when every goal met leads to another goal, when every breakthrough is followed by another insecurity to fix, when the pursuit of growth starts to feel more like punishment than liberation. This is when self-help becomes self-harm. When the books and routines and mindset hacks stop expanding you and start suffocating you. When becoming better means never being good enough. And the most dangerous part? It looks healthy from the outside. It gets praised, it gets likes. But deep down, it's driven by shame. Jung knew this spiral well. He warned that true transformation doesn't come from chasing light. It comes from confronting darkness, from walking into the parts of ourselves we were taught to fear. Not to destroy them, but to listen to them, to ask what they've been trying to tell us. You don't escape your shadow by becoming better. You escape it by becoming honest. Because peace doesn't come from sculpting a flawless identity. It comes from reclaiming the parts of you that never needed to be hidden in the first place. At some point in the journey of self-improvement, the pursuit stops feeling like growth and starts feeling like war. Not a war against obstacles or limitations, but a war against the self. And that's where Carl Jung's warning becomes urgent. He understood something most modern advice ignores. That healing isn't about defeating your flaws. It's about learning to live with them. We are conditioned to believe that peace is the reward at the end of perfection. That once we eliminate every weakness, every insecurity, every irrational fear, we'll finally be free. But Jung taught the opposite. He taught that true freedom comes not from eliminating the shadow, but from integrating it. From building a relationship with the very parts of yourself you were taught to fear. You can't outwork your shadow. You can't silence it with productivity, drown it in habits, or erase it with willpower. It will wait. And when you're tired, when your routines break down and your motivation fades, it will rise. And it won't ask for permission. That's the part no one tells you. That real transformation isn't about winning the battle within. It's about ending the war, letting go of the idea that you need to be flawless to be worthy. Peace doesn't come from purging your darkness. It comes from learning to carry it with grace. The goal isn't to become perfect. It's to become whole, to walk through life without needing to hide, to meet your fear without flinching, to sit with your shame without running, to stop seeing your wounds as failures and start seeing them as maps. Jung knew this. He didn't want you to build a better mask. He wanted you to take it off. Because only when you stop trying to upgrade yourself into something you're not, can you finally become who you are. Part of the reason peace feels so distant is because we've confused it with perfection. We think we'll earn it after we fix all our flaws, silence every doubt, and become some ideal version of ourselves. But Jung knew better. He understood that real peace doesn't come from controlling the chaos, it comes from learning to coexist with it. He wrote that Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration. That means peace isn't found by eliminating the parts of you that are angry, sad, afraid, or uncertain. It's found by bringing them to the table, listening to them, giving them a voice instead of exiling them. But most people don't want to hear that. They want clean lines, easy answers, a path that looks good from the outside. And that's why so many are stuck. Because the more you reject your inner contradictions, the more fragmented you become. You don't evolve, you fracture. There's no peace in a constant war with yourself. You can't meditate your way out of shame if you won't first admit it exists. You can't breathe through your anxiety if you've built a life around pretending you're always calm. What you deny, you empower. What you face, you transform. So if you're exhausted from trying to always be better, maybe it's time to stop. Not because you failed, but because you finally realized the point was never to be perfect. It was to be whole. There's a strange kind of exhaustion that comes from always trying to be better. Not the tiredness from effort, but the soul-deep fatigue of never feeling enough. Carl Jung understood this as a psychological sickness, a chronic inner noise that arises when we mistake personal evolution for constant self-correction. You can't find peace when you treat your entire identity as a problem to be solved. In Jung's framework, peace doesn't come from fixing the ego. It comes from uniting it with the shadow. With the parts you were told to silence. Your anger, your fear, your sadness, your shame. These aren't enemies of growth. They are proof you are human. When you chase perfection, you reinforce a silent judgment that who you are now is inadequate. And that message, it runs deep. The modern obsession with becoming your highest self often mirrors the same rigidity we criticize in systems of control. You must act a certain way, think a certain way, feel only certain emotions. But Jung knew that sterilizing your personality for the sake of being better creates imbalance. When you cut off parts of your psyche to appear enlightened, you don't rise, you fracture. This is where so many break, not because they didn't try hard enough, but because they tried too hard to be someone they're not. They burned their real self at the altar of a false ideal. And when the mask starts to slip, they don't feel free, they feel like a fraud. That's the price of improvement without integration. Jung didn't want you to transcend your humanness. He wanted you to embrace it, to stand in front of the mirror and say, I see it all, and I choose wholeness anyway. That's the shift. That's when the chase ends. That's when peace finally begins. The moment you stop chasing your ideal self, something strange happens. You begin to meet your real self, not the version you've been trying to sculpt perfect and market to the world, but the version that's been waiting underneath all along. The one you've been taught to hide, polish, or improve. The one that exists beneath the layers of ambition, achievement, and performance. The one that still remembers who you were before the world told you who you had to be. Carl Jung understood that the psyche doesn't want perfection. It wants balance, integration, harmony between the light and the dark, the strong and the scared, the confident and the insecure. That's what he meant by individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are, not who the world told you to be. He saw the psyche as a complex system seeking wholeness, not improvement. Wholeness means nothing is rejected. Every part belongs. Even the parts you were shamed for. Even the ones you thought you had to erase. But that process doesn't happen through constant ambition. It doesn't live in to-do lists or self-help checklists. It happens through surrender, through brutal honesty, through stillness, through pausing long enough to hear the parts of yourself you've ignored in the name of progress. The anger that masks sadness, the pride that hides fear, the productivity that covers up a deep feeling of unworthiness, and most importantly, the constant forward motion that's really just a distraction from the silence within. Jung warned that what you resist not only persists, it grows stronger. So if you keep resisting your pain, your flaws, your confusion, you'll end up building an identity around denial, a version of yourself that looks functional on the outside, but feels hollow and unstable inside. You'll walk through life like a well-rehearsed character, always performing, always achieving, always striving, and never arriving. Because you were never trying to grow, you were trying to escape. The world will reward that version. It will praise your discipline, your output, your consistency. It will applaud your image while being blind to your emptiness. But you'll know the truth. That you're tired, that you're split, that you've been living two lives, one for the world and one in the shadows. And eventually, the cost of that divide becomes too heavy to carry. And that's the real price of ignoring your shadow. You might gain success, status, validation, but it's success built on self-abandonment, peace built on pretending, connection built on performance. Jung knew better. He knew that healing isn't found in fixing or perfecting. It's found in remembering, in reclaiming the parts of you that were exiled, in realizing that the wholeness you're chasing has always been inside you, buried, not broken. The moment you stop striving and start listening, the real work begins, not to become someone new, but to come home to the person you were before the performance began. Here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. You don't need to become your best self. You need to become your real self. The self you abandoned in the name of discipline, image, and endless improvement. The self that was messy but alive, flawed but whole. Carl Jung didn't teach self-perfection. He taught self-confrontation. He believed that the goal of life wasn't to become flawless, but to become complete. To integrate your contradictions, not erase them. In a world obsessed with the next upgrade, this is radical. Because it means stepping off the treadmill. It means giving up the chase. The modern self-help world tells you that peace lies just one more habit away, one more routine, one more version of yourself. But peace isn't found through becoming. It's found through remembering. Remembering who you were before you thought you had to earn your worth. Before you turned your soul into a checklist. You've been conditioned to treat yourself like a project. But you're not a project. You're a person. And people don't need to be optimized. They need to be understood. They need to feel. They need to break sometimes and not be punished for it. So if you're tired of always striving, of never feeling enough, of chasing an ideal that keeps moving further away, that's not failure. That's your psyche begging for a different path. One that doesn't promise perfection, one that offers something better. Integration. Because the most dangerous obsession isn't with failure. It's with improvement that never ends. And the most liberating choice you can make is to stop chasing who you think you should be and start listening to who you already are.